Hello and welcome back to Calligraphy Biz Corner and Happy New Year. We completely forgot to wish you all a Happy New Year on our last episode because we recorded it before Christmas even. So I feel like we were not in the new year, new energy mindset just yet. So we hope that your 2025 is off to a fantastic start. I'm Elaine.
And I'm Xiao Chen, and we're super excited to bring you our first guest episode of the year with the first wedding planner that we've had on this podcast. Since we're in peak wedding inquiry season right now, we thought it would be a great time to bring on a planner and chat all about trends for 2025. And man, Desiree came prepared. I think she shared like 8 or 9 wedding trends with us. So you'll definitely want to tune into this episode. She also talks about where she looks for trends and inspiration. And then, most importantly, as a calligrapher, how we can incorporate trends, whether the ones she identified or other ones that we see, into conversations with our clients.
Yeah. So Desiree and I got connected in the fall of 2024, and it was actually perfect timing because I feel like we were starting to think about what episodes do we want for 2025. We knew we wanted to have a planner on to chat with us about wedding trends, but we weren't sure who. And so we got introduced, and then I was actually a guest on her podcast, Ask the Planner, in November. We can link to that episode in the show notes in case anybody wants to go take a listen. But we just had so much fun chatting all about wedding signage and calligraphy. And kind of like Xiao Chen said after we finished recording our episode with her, she's so easy to talk to. She's so sweet and down to earth, but like also such a boss lady.
Yeah.
So we just knew, like, after I chatted with her on her podcast, I was like, Xiao Chen, I think I found our planner for Calligraphy Biz Corner. So we were super excited that she was able to join us today.
Yeah. And so, as we kind of reflect back about the recording that we just had with Desiree, we wanted to share some of our takeaways for you to keep an eye out for too as you listen. One thing that really I noticed as she was talking throughout the interview and probably contributes to why she's such a boss is that she's always talking about and thinking about how you can position yourself as a thought leader or how you can showcase yourself as the expert in what you do in your industry as a calligrapher or creative, whatever business you might have. And throughout the episode, I want you just to listen for that when she talks about, when she kind of gives those suggestions of like, here's how you can position yourself as a thought leader and showcase that for your clients. We all have imposter syndrome, right? I hear it so much from calligraphers that I talk to because especially working in the wedding industry, there's a lot of elements of a wedding that we might not be familiar with. But just remember that you are the expert at your specific craft. You don't have to be the expert at every single aspect of the wedding, right? But someone is hiring you because they trust you for this element of their wedding. So you want to make sure that you're showcasing yourself as the expert and asking the right questions to your clients. And that's something that we talk a little bit about in this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I love how much she was framing things as that thought leadership and like really positioning yourself as the expert and kind of authority figure for your industry. Because I agree with you that I think as calligraphers, there's a lot of imposter syndrome. And I know for me personally, it took me a long time to feel comfortable and confident pitching ideas to my clients and making suggestions and positioning myself as that kind of guide in their wedding calligraphy process. But that is what they're coming to you for. And as you go on in your business, you're going to have experience built up that all feeds into your expertise. So just piggybacking off of what you said, definitely keep your eyes or keep your ears open for those moments within the show and just take this as the permission that maybe you needed or maybe you didn't need to step into your expertise. Kind of, again, tying into that, one of my favorite takeaways was in the very beginning, but it kind of went throughout the episode as well, was, when you're thinking of ideas, creative designs for weddings, things like that, even looking at trends, to look outside of your niche and outside of your industry. And one of my favorite things that she said was that she doesn't follow that many planners on Instagram because she wants a more, I guess, a wider variety of influences on her social media feed for gathering ideas and inspiration. And I know I follow a ton of calligraphers on my Instagram, and it is inspiring. And I absolutely love connecting with the people in our community. But at the same time, you don't want that to kind of cloud your vision or you're intaking so much that people in your industry are doing that you just start to copy them rather than come up with your own creative ideas. So I guess also take this as permission to, you don't necessarily need to unfollow people if you don't want to unfollow people, but you can mute people from time to time. So if you're feeling like your social media or where you're gathering inspiration from is overrun by calligraphers, then we both strongly encourage you to diversify that a little bit.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about how Instagram can be like an echo chamber too. So definitely if you're like all your content's the same, it's very homogenous, you're just seeing the same stuff over and over. And when we're talking about the topic of trends, part of it's about identifying things that other people aren't doing yet. It's about things that aren't overdone yet. And so I love this idea of finding inspiration in other places. Before I read Desiree's intro, just a quick note to our listeners that if you listen to the Empowered CEO episode right before this, that was a series, and we will be continuing that series after this episode. So, about Desiree, she is a luxury wedding planner educator and host of the Ask the Planner wedding and event planning podcast. Her work has been seen in the Today Show, New York Magazine, Inspired by This, Carrots and Cake, among others. She has also been featured on multiple podcasts, including The Power and Purpose, Consider the Wildflowers, The Big Wedding Planning Podcast, and The Wedpreneur. For Desiree, life is too short to waste it on moments that don't give you joy. As the CEO and lead event designer at Verve Event Co., she and her team focus on operations, design, and execution, while also dreaming up thoughtful touches and design motifs that turn celebrations into heirloom occasions. As the host of the Ask the Planner podcast, she provides planners and couples with tangible tools and advice so that they can plan their milestones with precision and infuse it with their personal style. So let's turn it over to the interview.
Welcome, Desiree, to Calligraphy Biz Corner. We are so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. You and I met in the fall when I was a guest on your podcast. So before we jump into our conversation today, for anyone who doesn't know you yet, can you just give our listeners a little intro as to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Elaine Show 10. I'm so excited to chat with you all. So I am a wedding planner based in upstate New York. I also have a podcast, like you mentioned, called Ask the Planner, and we plan luxury wedding weekends for couples, primarily in the Northeast, but we also travel. So I'm so excited to chat about this exciting, fun topic.
We thought you'd be the perfect person to bring on to talk about wedding trends, especially as a planner, you kind of see all aspects of the wedding. So we'd love to kick it off by asking you, like, where do you look for wedding trends and wedding inspiration? And where would you recommend other wedding pros like ourselves to look for trends?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I think we talked about a little bit before we started recording, but I think we want to make a distinction first of what we're talking about when we say trend. There's a difference between trendy and what's trending, meaning what's catching people's eye and their attention, and then also what is this kind of like going on in the industry as a whole. We do a lot of custom work with our couples, so we don't necessarily just want to stick with what's trendy. A lot of our couples will say, like, I want my wedding to be timeless and I want it to look like, I want to look back on it in 20 years and still be excited about it, which it's still going to look like you had it 20 years ago because that's just the reality of it. We like to kind of be inspired by what's exciting people and then take that and figure out how we can personalize it to each couple so that we're not just copying a table that we saw, but really making it a thoughtful decision around it and using that inspiration for what people are doing and are excited about and then incorporating it into our weddings. So to answer your question, I think the easiest and probably the most obvious one is Instagram. I think that's a really great source of inspiration. I try not to follow a lot of planners, which may sound weird, but I try not to like look at what everyone else is doing because then I feel like I'll end up copying people, even if it's like subconscious. But there are definitely still some planners and designers that I admire and really respect. And I think they also can not be a beacon, but they definitely kind of have a touch point on like what is trending or what like new ways of doing things or looking at things or executing things, which I think is always makes you kind of pause and think, okay, that's a cool new way of doing something, whatever it is. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. How can we incorporate that into our work? So Instagram is one. I also like following other creative accounts in general, like fashion or other brands, also just to get inspiration from that, but also seeing like because I feel like a lot of the trends in other industries like textiles, interior design also kind of feel into the wedding industry as a whole, like colors for sure, typography. So even kind of getting an idea of what is going on in other creative industries is also important. It also keeps your work, I think, fresh. From time to time, I do read articles on major brand publications like Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, etc., just so that I'm not in my own little bubble of like, these are the people that I follow on Instagram and these are what everyone's doing, but really trying to figure out like what the wider audience is doing. I think it's important as a creative and as a business owner to think about where are your target clients looking also, like where are they being inspired? Because there's a difference between what you like personally and what's inspiring for you, but then also like what your potential customers are going to be inspired by and like where they're hanging out. So I think having that lens of where, what they're excited about, what fashion do they like, etc., will also help you with getting inspiration as well. And then the last place that I just wanted to know that I don't get inspiration from necessarily, but I still do use and go on is Pinterest, only because I mean, as a designer, as a business owner, wedding planner, I definitely utilize Pinterest, meaning I post on it a lot, for SEO, etc. But I find that if I'm trying to get ideas and inspiration, Pinterest is not the best place to go because a lot of the pins are recycled. They're from several years ago. So if you want to know what has been overdone or is like a trend that may be on its way out, sorry, Pinterest, maybe consider that, because I feel like sometimes it's when like you see it a lot and that's when you're like, okay, this is a trend. It's been around for a while and maybe we want to avoid that. Even though like it might feel fresh to you, it's been around a while, if that makes sense.
That's a really good point. I'm glad you kind of told us where not to look as well. But I love the point you made about the Instagram kind of being an echo chamber. So you want to include Instagram as an inspiration, but also other sources.
I guess one of my like biggest questions would be, as we are, starting to see what's trending for 2025, we're looking on Instagram, we're looking in other publications and all of these other kind of creative outlets. How do we decide and how accurate do you typically find these various sources to be of like what is trending? Because I guess in a way I'm kind of like, well, if I just see a cool tablescape on Instagram, like, am I automatically like, oh, that's a trend? Or is it only when I like start to see it more often? Because also too, when you're like looking at, say the Knot just came out with like a 2025 wedding trends post. It's like, but 25 just started. So like, how are they making these predictions too, I guess?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. I think you always have to take things with a grain of salt. I think all these businesses are businesses and they're marketers and they might have something to sell, whether it's an affiliate, whether it's like a partner that they already have a relationship with. So I think that's something that you should definitely consider when you're looking at what people are saying. I think some articles will quote other planners or designers. And I think that can have some more accuracy in it because it's people that are actually in the trenches and are actually doing it, or they have examples of what they've been doing, etc. But I think also you just have to think about, is there an affiliate link that when you click on this trend that they talk about, are they getting money from it? Which there's nothing wrong with that. I think, they usually disclose it, but I think just thinking about, if there's another agenda. I'm not saying that they're just saying it to, to make money. I think they have an audience and they have like a wide reach because they probably are accurate. But I think just thinking about, how they might be influenced is something to consider too.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
So in terms of identifying trend and looking at all these different sources, what about listening to your couples as a source of like, what's hot and what's coming?
Yeah, I think obviously, like, you all will agree, first and foremost, we definitely want to listen to the couple on like what they're asking for and what they want. A lot of our couples will have maybe an idea of what they like. A lot of them will have a stronger idea of what they don't like, I think, a lot of times. So it's our job as the planner to pull that out from them and really kind of get an idea of like, well, if you like this trend, great. What is it about this trend that you like, so that we can figure out how we can incorporate it into your design and not just copy something that we saw on Pinterest, right? I think, figuring out what's exciting to them about it is helpful. And then personalizing it, which I think is what most couples want. I have had some couples, like I have this one example where a couple was like, I really, really just want blush and burgundy. And this was like circa 2019. And I think you might guys remember that blush and burgundy trend. And I was like, I've seen this color combination a lot. I feel like we can incorporate this, but let's add some dusty blue. Let's add some other colors, some mauve in there to kind of round it out and make it feel more personal to you and not just like this trend that's we've been seeing everywhere. And she was on board and she was really excited. So it was like, thank goodness. But then like I think like a month later after I presented the design, she was like, I just went to a wedding. Guess what their color palette was? Blush and burgundy. And I was like, I told you this. And I was like, this is why, it's really important to kind of see what's also on its way out, so you can figure out like how do you guide your couples so that they don't make a decision that they're going to later regret. I did have another bride who was like, I really just want green and gold. And it was an October wedding. And I was like, I think it's going to look like Christmas. And I showed her, green and gold and ivory and like a little bit of blue just to kind of give it some more variety. She said yes initially, but then everything she chose was just green and gold. And I was like, well, we tried. It made her happy. She really liked it. And like at the end of the day, that's all you can do. Like you can advise them and help them and show them your perspective, but they're the client. And so if that's what they want, that's what they want. You just go on and make them happy.
Yep, exactly. I feel like you can guide them so much. and then that's it. I feel like we definitely have experiences as calligraphers too for making suggestions and just people being like, no, I just want to do this. And you're like, okay.
Okay.
Thanks for hearing me out.
Yeah, I think with trends, there's definitely this balance of it trending versus getting to the point where it's so trendy that it becomes overdone. But then to
Right.
your point, sometimes it's still new to them, right?
And I think, I don't know how long of a lifespan you have with your clients, depending on like when you start working with them, if it's from the save the days on. I also find that sometimes couples' tastes change during the planning process. So they can, I don't always put my foot down in the very beginning if they feel very strongly about something. I'll say, okay, great. Like we'll definitely consider that and take that into, whatever, incorporate that into the design, da da da. And then like, we'll follow up on that thing, whatever it was, throughout the planning process. And then usually at some point they're like, that time when you said X, you are right. And I actually have seen it a lot, or like, I don't want to do it anymore, whatever. And they're like, okay. But they feel like they made that decision. And sometimes they have to go through that experience or take that time to really see what else, because they're so new to it, to really see what's going on and then decide maybe you're right or maybe not.
100%.
So switching gears a little bit into like forward thinking predictions, what trends are you seeing right now for 2025?
So exciting. Okay, we have a lot. I have a lot that I, put together in my little list. One of the first things that I think is really exciting that may not surprise you, but is the personalized touches. And I think personalized, interactive, immersive, like all of those things to keep the guests entertained. One of the things that people have, been talking about lately is live engraving, having that kind of interactive experience at an event, I think is really important. I think thinking about how it's going to be produced is important to consider as well. I was actually at an event, it was a conference, and they had live engraving at the conference. It was, they had a little, not a booth, but they had a setup and there was somebody engraving luggage tags with your initials, which was really nice. And then I realized that the luggage tags were all brown. And I was like, actually, can you just make one for my husband? Because brown isn't my favorite. And I was like, it's not going to match anything. So just make one for my husband. He was also producing a lot for a lot of guests. And I feel like he kind of got backed up. So I feel like if you're doing something that is immersive or interactive, like sketching, live painting, late night pizza, ice cream, s'mores bar, like lots of these interactive things, make sure you have enough staff to execute it. Just because, you know, if you are doing the live calligraphy on a hat or a jacket or shoes, like I saw recently, and I have no idea if it's like a trend right now, but like she does stitching and embroidery on canvas sneakers. And I was like, that is so cute. Not many people are going to have canvas sneakers, but does the amount of time, whatever you're doing and how long it's going to take you to do that at an event, I think is definitely something that you want to consider.
Well, as calligraphers, obviously we see a ton of live engraving, live calligraphy, live foiling, all of this like live component now at weddings. So we are so excited that you brought this up as the very first thing you talked about. I mean, maybe we primed you a little bit in the interview guide for it, but hopefully it is your top trend. But we totally agree. And actually, Elena and I have been chatting in the background about planning an episode specific to interactive calligraphy at weddings, because I do think it is a little bit different than when you're at a conference or something corporate because of that super personalized, not to mention like this is somebody's like big day, right? So I totally agree about like making sure the staffing is on point. We've also been talking with other calligraphers about when they work at weddings, they bring on assistants. And I think that's just absolutely a non-negotiable to make sure that whole experience is absolutely seamless for not just the couple, but all of their guests as well. And maybe even any like vendors, right, that you're interacting with on site.
Yeah, I think calligraphy is so beautiful. It's artwork to me. And so I think being able to expose the guests to that at the wedding, like this is the calligrapher who did the stationery and now she's here and she's going to do whatever. I think just one has that full circle moment, but yeah, definitely make sure you staff up. Another trend that people are excited about, or that I'm seeing more incorporated, is these kind of restaurant style weddings or like a restaurant inspired wedding where people are having their weddings at really high end restaurants that's it's hard to get a reservation at, or even how like the restaurant kind of floor plan informs a floor plan in a tent or a space with a lot of space. So they'll have like banquettes and they'll have like multiple seating, or not arrangements, but types. So they'll have, you know, the round tables, the square tables, the rectangular tables. They have like, lots of soft seating. And it really feels like you're in a restaurant and not just a sea of all around tables, which I think is it's really beautiful. And I think it's just visually inspiring because there's like a lot of different texture and there's just a lot of different places to make it custom and make it feel different and add texture to the room. Another trend that I'm seeing that has been around for at least a little bit, but I don't think is going anywhere, is sustainability. I feel like it's been a buzzword for a while. I'm hearing more and more that couples don't like to see waste, which I think is hard if you're in the wedding industry because you're making things for one event, for one day or for one weekend. But I think when we talk about sustainability, I think us as vendors, calligraphers, et cetera, need to just think about how we can, because your calligraphy is going to go on something, whether it's paper, whether it's a sign, et cetera, thinking about how it's going to be able to be reused, or if you get the paper later and you can recycle it, or like the paper that you use has been recycled, whatever it is. Just having something to show that you are thinking about this, that you have something in place to at least like reduce the waste or reuse it, or even just try to like think of how something can live on again and not just a one-time use, which I know is hard, but I feel like that's definitely not. I think couples, consumers in general, just want to feel good about their purchases. Like it's great if it's like, whatever they want, but if they feel good, like they're doing good with their purchase, I feel like it's just like another added benefit that could distinguish you from somebody else.
I love this point as well because it's something that I always think about and do struggle with too, because you're trying to create something that's like personal, unique to them, and at the same time try to make it sustainable, right? And sometimes it feels contradictory. But a couple suggestions that I'll put out there for like other calligraphers is this is where I find rentals to be really helpful. So sometimes like table numbers can be a little bit more, not generic, but things that people they don't need to be as customized necessarily. People are kind of okay with like a neutral set that goes with their palette. So maybe you keep something like that in your rental inventory, or having like some rental mirrors. I know calligraphers who have big acrylic pieces that they reuse. I also like the supplier that I purchased my acrylic from, because I know that's a big concern with like plastic, single-use plastics. They recycle acrylic. So totally agree with you on this. And as calligraphers, like we should definitely be thinking about our part and how we can do this. And also like the piece about communicating it to your client. I notice a lot of times that it's something I think about that's in my mind, but I need to do a better job of actually communicating that outwardly to my client.
I think you bring up a lot of really good points. And I think just kind of having it more in the forefront, you don't have to talk about it all the time, but at least one, having an answer prepared, but even like including it in some of the language that you have, or just inserting it in there in a post of like, sometimes people ask us about X, Y, and Z. And like, this is definitely a concern in our industry. And like, this is how we deal with it or whatever. I think it also like distinguish you, I think, from other people that aren't talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like to piggyback off of all of this, like one thing that I tried to promote as well in like my messaging too is this idea of, sure, like maybe your welcome sign is only going to be used once for your wedding, or your bar sign, but because you're hiring somebody who's creating something so custom, like I'm always thinking of ways and sharing them with my clients of how can you reuse this after your wedding day? Like how can we create a welcome sign that you want to display in your home afterwards? Or, I mean, bar signs are a huge one. People are always sending me pictures of like, look, here's my bar sign on my bar cart, or like in my kitchen or something like that. And that's so nice. So on top of it, like the rentals and being able to reuse things in that way, or like being able to recycle materials, I also think thinking through as calligraphers specifically, how can we turn these pieces, these custom pieces, into keepsakes that are going to be, somewhere in their home or in a keepsake box or something long after the wedding day, because people want to remember those occasions too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely one of the people that likes to hold on to things. So having those tactile items to help us remember these special events, I think is, I think it kind of brings it home of like this was actually at our wedding and here's how we're using it now. So the next trend I think that's really fun and kind of different is objects as invitations, or even maybe as a save the date. People like we said, things that are tactile. And a couple of years ago, I feel like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a lot of people were into like those invitation boxes. And it was like this giant box that would come in and it has like all these different things. And I feel like this is kind of like the next iteration of that, where people like I said, like the tactile thing. So having an object that's being mailed or shipped to people as their save the date or the invitation, I think just helps set the tone of like, this is something fun. It's also something you can use, which I think is kind of a nice trend that people are excited about.
What objects have you seen? I'm so curious. My mind immediately goes to like the magnets. I feel like save the date magnets were really big. I don't know how many years ago.
It would not be magnets. No, I think it's like
I was like, I feel like I'm talking about something a little more elevated than a magnet.
I think it would be something. So the things that I think that are really fun would be things that relate to your destination or where you're getting married or what you're doing. So if it's like it has a retro vibe, you can use those like those retro hotel or motel keychains. If it's something like Western, you could have something that's like rope or like braided. So that's something that's kind of like brings in that texture and that textile feeling. If it's something that's more beachy, it could be something like, I was thinking like flat, like a shell, like just something, I think, to make it feel like you're not just getting a save the date with their photo on it and it's going to be like looking at you from your fridge for the next year, which is not my favorite.
Yeah, I feel like there's that moment of like surprise and delight, right? When you
Mhm.
incorporate something unique like that.
Exactly. And I feel like your stationery or your invitation or save the date is like one of the first experiences you have with your guests. So it's really an opportunity for you to make an impression and to get them really excited. It's not just about like, oh, here, like this is what we're doing. It's really like, I want you to be excited because we're excited and it's going to be a special time.
Yep, absolutely. I'm so glad you made that point because, I feel like we hear a lot as stationers and calligraphers like, oh, the invites will just end up in the trash, so I'm not going to spend a lot of money on them. And of course, like there are all different budget ranges and there are options for all different budget ranges, but it's like, it's not just a piece of paper that's going to end up in the trash. Just like you said, it's really that first introduction to your wedding celebration and what your guests can expect. And it's setting the tone for everything that's to follow. So I'm glad that we have a planner.
Yeah, no, and also I think to that point, like, wouldn't you want to be the one that sends them something that they are going to keep? Like,
Right.
yours is the one invitation, yours is the one piece of like envelope or whatever it is that they were like, this is so beautiful, I'm going to keep this.
When I was looking at your website and your Instagram, I saw that you had so many beautiful detailed shots of invitations and like signage and other details and flowers. I was like, this is our person. She
I
gets
love
us.
it. I love it. I just love all. I mean, it's like picking my favorite child. All of it is just so important. And I think they all have their own little touches or their own little. It's like one giant jigsaw puzzle, right? Of like your day and your personalities and who they are as people and as a couple. And I feel like everything ties in together. But I love it when something from the save the date is like brought back for the wedding day, and it's like you saw a little hint of it here where there was like a little sailboat or whatever. Like we did one where the couple got engaged on a sailboat, so the stationer and calligrapher drew the sailboat, and then we had, I think that was on like their save the date, and then like the sailboat was used in like the 12 pattern on their invitation, and then like the sailboat was again used on like their escort cards, and it was like a acrylic ornament, but then like that was something that people are going to keep because they'll, not everyone celebrates Christmas, but like it's something that people can hang and keep afterward, which I think is just, I think it's fun. So I think the next trend, which is probably not going to surprise your listeners, would be content creators. I think this is huge for not just couples in the who are getting married, vendors who are on site, but also us, just vendors, people, service providers that are trying to market our businesses. I feel like having, and not necessarily just hiring a content creator. So yes, if you're at an event, you're doing live engraving or live foil or whatever, and having someone to capture that, I think is important. But I think, even just the way we capture ourselves in the behind the scenes and thinking of ourselves as content creators is important, because how you present yourself, how you market yourself is like the bar just keeps going up and up and up, which I know is frustrating and annoying, but I feel like that's kind of what we kind of signed up for when we became business owners. So I think I saw something where it was on Instagram, but it was, just thinking of filming yourself in different ways. And I think because you are a calligrapher and you're an artist, there's so many ways that you can, different angles that you can display your work, or how you're working, or even like how you get ready to get your ink out, or like when you're mixing the ink, or like all of these different things to kind of tell the story of what you do as an artist. So that's definitely something that I think is here to stay for sure. So maybe not a trend, but something that was a trend. That's just something that's going to be here for a while.
I was just commenting to Elaine maybe this week or last week about how I feel like as a business owner, I have to be a full-time content creator too. But you're right. There's people you can hire who can do that for you. But let's talk about it in the context of weddings too, because I know that like wedding content creators, I feel like that is a kind of up and coming trend. Have you worked with them before? And like, how do you see them as being different than like videographers that people hire? And do people hire both?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Yes, they are different. So we actually had a content creator come on our podcast. So a lot of times the content creator is really more someone that has like an iPhone, or they call it like iPhone footage or phone footage of the day. So they're really capturing more kind of raw behind the scenes video or photos that they're going to, give to the client. Usually it's like a 24-hour turnaround time, which I think is crazy, but it's also like just all of the stills in the video that they capture. They are typically there in addition to the photo and videography team. It is important to have all of them talk, make sure they're all on the same page. Cause back in the day, it was like, make sure that the photo and video guy were, in sync and talking. But now it's like, you have to add in this other element. A lot of times, at least from what I have been hearing, I think there are definitely couples that are like kind of into like the, let's do a fun trend that we saw on Instagram or TikTok, and like we'll film it, and okay, great. Like maybe you're going to go viral, but I think a lot of times the reason why people are hiring content creators is because they want to be able to experience and relive that day really soon, like really fast turnaround time, because the day goes by so quickly for them, and you don't want them on their phone filming everything, or like behind the camera, holding the phone. but you still want a way to kind of relive it really, really fast. So I think a lot of the content creators are able to address that. Some will bring a normal camera that they're using to film, but a lot of times it's, a really good iPhone. They'll have a tripod, or they'll have like a gimbal, the little stand to help them make sure that it's steady. But it's really something for them to just like kind of have those videos to reflect on their day, because it did go by so fast.
And I wonder if there's also a desire to just have it be more like real and raw, versus I feel like the videos from the videography are always like you're in a movie, there's like slow-mo,
Yeah, and I think that's really the big distinction, is that they're not going to replace your video team. What you're going to get from both are very different. It's like they're really short clips, but the videographer is really going to put together that like cinematic feel of like, this is our story and this is our day, and like it's like really the storytelling behind it, whereas the iPhone or the content creators really like the BTS, this is what was happening. And even with like the angles, it still feels like a very like a fly on the wall. I was just there enjoying it, and like, this is what we got, and even like, the selfie photos or whatever, like the selfie videos, I think that's what they want, because they don't want to be the one doing it, but they want someone to help them capture that for them.
Yeah. And I feel like the pressure to not have my phone on me would feel so nice on my wedding day. Like if I'm putting myself in that position, I'm like, I'm not gonna want my phone, or like have to worry about like, oh, this is such a fun moment, I want to capture it. Like I want my phone out of sight.
Yeah. No, I think we really want our couples to be in the moment, to live in the moment, to revel in that moment, all those things, to really be present. And it doesn't happen when you have a phone in your hand. But you want someone, not a bridesmaid, not a maid of honor. You want someone to do it so that, you have that. So I think the next trend that I would say would be whimsical details, which I think, was kind of becoming a thing in 2024, but it's still going to be around, which, to me, that the first thing that I think of are bows or custom ribbon. I think, people were putting ribbon in their hair, or putting bows like as decoration, or putting bows in their stationery, or even like the drawings of bows. I think it's going to become even bigger in 2025. And I think that's just kind of it's like a small detail, but I think it's those little touches, I think, that are fun or can be incorporated in calligraphy as well.
Yeah, one of the calligraphers that I'm working with right now in my coaching program, she just shared some photos from a wedding from last year, and she did place cards on silk ribbon that was like tied around the bottom of wine glasses, and it looked so pretty.
No, I think it's so pretty. And I think it's just people like that personalized touch. So there's so many ways that you can incorporate it as a calligrapher. And I feel like ribbon, I think ribbon is like not a luxury, but it's like when people put a ribbon on something, it denotes that it's something special, like a gift, or like when you put around a package or whatever. It just makes something feel more special. So the next trend, like the second to last trend that I think I'm seeing a lot, which I think is something that your listeners could be thinking about, is some nostalgia for times past. And I was kind of thinking of like, why is this happening? I think one of the examples that I think trends or things that people are excited about are cyclical, right? Like things happen in waves. I think with the cottagecore trend a couple of years ago, I feel like people are kind of yearning or craving that like simpler time before we had all this technology, before we had all these phones. So they're kind of like feeling nostalgic for eras gone by. I see with like the old fashioned cakes that are, I feel like in like the 70s, you would have like your parents, and they would have like those big giant tiered cakes, and they have all like the little piping and the icing. Those are definitely coming back, and they're like coming back really big, I think. So I think just thinking about how, what trends that I think would have looked dated a couple of years ago, meaning like it was from like the 70s or the 80s, how are those going to come back? Because I think that's kind of the direction that people are going in.
I had a wedding last year that the theme was like ginger jar.
Oh yeah.
Or that kind of like intricate, a little bit old-timey pattern. I don't know if that's how
I mean, like grandma core became a thing, like doilies were a thing.
Yeah.
Like I definitely feel like people are wanting like a modern spin on older fashioned stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's like bringing it back in a new and unique way, like bringing something like that's nostalgic into a modern like time,
Yeah.
But I love that point about like maybe it's because of all the tech we're constantly surrounded by, especially with like now everything AI, that you're just craving something that's like familiar that you can touch.
And maybe that's just me because I feel overwhelmed with technology. But I really feel it's like those were the times when it was simpler and life was different. And it's like, it was really sweet that they, had those cakes and they were like covered in icing and like all those little like ribbons and the piping and everything. Like I think I do love like an avant-garde cake that's like really like clean and modern, etc. But then I feel like people are really liking those like really fun, old-fashioned, like old-timey kind of cakes. I wouldn't be surprised if like fashion went back that, like with like the larger sleeves and like, I don't know, who knows?
Yeah. I feel like flare jeans are back. So
Yeah. Yeah, like my daughter's like, I want flared leggings, and I'm like, I know.
You can have my old ones.
Yeah, I feel like I was in like Walmart or somewhere, and like all of the clothes there, I was like, I wore that in the 90s. Like I remember literally like this pattern of clothing, and now it's back, which is just crazy.
Like I should have never cleaned out my closet from like high school.
My childhood room, quick tangent, is like a time capsule. Like I have the beaded curtains and the inflatable couch and the magazine, like, of all the teenage heartthrobs that I liked posted on my wall. So
I mean, it's in now. I told my friends, I was like, guys, the 90s are back because American Girl has added like the 90s American Girl to their historical collection. She had like a blow up chair from Delia's, and I was like, I can't.
Oh my God. I remember that.
Right?
I think we're the nostalgia. Our childhood is the nostalgia now.
Well, I think if you think about it, like we're the ones, people in our generation are the ones that are making the purchases and like doing the design. And I think they're, our generation are the thought leaders in fashion. And it's like, and I think that's where you get a lot of the throwback of the fashion, the music. Okay, and then the last trend that I wanted to talk about was private vows, which I think was really great for calligraphers too to be thinking about, because a lot of our couples, because the day does go by so quickly and they just want a moment to kind of breathe and be with each other. So a lot of times they'll do like the first look or the first touch, or they'll do sunset portraits. But a lot of our couples, whether or not they have a church ceremony or a ceremony outside or, off property, not in a religious setting, they still will do private vows with each other. One, I think it's really, really sweet because they have that time to kind of be with each other. But two, they're reading their vows that they wrote out. And I'm always like, do you want to have somebody write those out for you? Because then, if a videographer is filming it, then they can, I see like the shot where they're reading from it, but then they see like the beautiful handwriting. And it's just something that, again, like you can be a part of and incorporate into your repertoire, but also is really giving your couples like something like very special and a keepsake that they're going to keep forever.
Yeah. I feel like the last thing that you want is like the crumpled paper. And that was like folded up in your pocket and like you're, dressed to the nines, but you're just holding the creased computer paper in your hand.
I always, because my couples think it's extra, but I always tell them like I don't want them reading their speech from their phone. They need to send it to me ahead of time. I will print it out. It'll be nice and crisp. It will be waiting for them at their seat. But it's just like when you're photographing and when you're capturing it and you're like reliving those moments. And I think maybe if there's some nostalgia or some sentimental value in like them having written it out if they have nice handwriting, but having someone to take the time to like write out those vows, or even like if you write them out and then they have them framed later on or something like that, I think would be really pretty too.
Or even for a lot of my couples, I just make the vow books for them. Yeah. So when they're being photographed on the outside, it looks nice. Yeah. All right, Desiree, let's talk about colors. So obviously colors in general, but also like Pantone every year puts out like a color of the year. And that seems to maybe play a part into trends. So 2025's color is Mocha Mousse, which they describe as a sophisticated brownish taupe, or as Elaine may have called it, a poopy brown. In case you're wondering what it looks like. So just curious, like, do you see this color playing into weddings? I don't typically see a lot of brownish tones, right? So I guess like if you do feel like Pantone has like an influence on wedding trends, like how do you see this color potentially being brought into life?
Yeah, I think when I saw this, I sent it to my stationer friend who's also a calligrapher, and I was like, really? I don't I don't know. So I think with the Mocha Mousse and, Pantone declaring a color of the year, I feel like part of it's marketing. I think part of it also is kind of like just a way for them to be relevant and kind of make a statement, not in a bad way, but like this is like a big thing that they always do every year. So we're going to make a big deal out of it, and like then it starts conversations, and it's them kind of making themselves relevant in a we do color way, but how does color reflect or impact everyday life, right? And so I think for that, I think I really wanted to know, because usually they'll say like why they're choosing this color, and I feel like I didn't really read a lot about like what made them choose that color. So I think thinking through the Pantones, your question, I don't necessarily know if I see this being incorporated into real couples' weddings, only because brown to me is a seasonal color for like the fall, late fall, winter. So at least for our weddings, a lot of our weddings are going to be spring, summer, and early fall because we're outdoors a lot. So it would be harder for us to incorporate the brown. It doesn't mean that we won't. If there's a bride that's like, I love the Mocha Moves, I'm like, great. Let's figure out. So if she said that, I would probably think, okay, what do you love about it? And then I would think I would probably do like the taupes, some natural colors, some dried flowers. I did have, actually, it was my sister's wedding a couple of years ago. She was in November, and we incorporate a lot of textiles into their design. But because it was late November, I knew that the flowers weren't going to be super vibrant. So I incorporated like a brownish taupe color, and then there was like an ivory, and there was a navy, and like a deep berry color. But it did have some brown, and it was more of a taupe, and it was incorporated in the flowers because there was some dried flowers feelings. There was some lunaria, which is kind of like a more cream and a off-white feeling. So I feel like it's like, to me, it inspires that like off-white taupe direction. I don't know if people are going to use that like Wendy's frosty brown.
I was just thinking a word to describe it.
But if I were to see it, I could see it in like drapery. I feel like draping is definitely going to be a big thing. But again, it's not like people are going to get brown drapes, but they're going to get that like off-white kind of like taupey color, I think, from the drapes. Again, the flowers, the browns, dried flowers. I could also see it, though, being incorporated in small ways in toile or in stationery, where there's like just a touch where it's like more of like an outline, and it's against like an ivory or a cream. So it's getting those neutrals, which people love neutrals, but it's not like the star of the show, I think. But I think, as creators and as business owners, I think it doesn't mean that you can't use it, because I think it gives you content to talk about, how, people are talking about this color. And I think it makes you a thought leader of how can you incorporate this in your work. Not necessarily like this is how we're going to do it for this wedding, but there's a photo shoot, or like even like past work that you had that may have some browns in them, just to show that it's possible, or you can do it, or you have flexibility, or just to kind of like think outside the box of like, you might think it looks like poop, but maybe in these, and it's like shades of this, it kind of looks like, oh look, it actually looks pretty in this use, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's a really great point, is like thinking about how else can you use it, and also thinking outside of just like, this is the color of the year and this is the trend, but thinking about like, okay, let's look at the spectrum here. Like what can we pull out and what can be applicable to our industry specifically?
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's like some creative license that a lot of people use when they're like, oh, this is the color.
Yes.
This is what we have. And it's like, well, those are shades of it, which is fine. I don't think anyone's going to do Mocha Mousse envelopes, but maybe for a fall and with like white letter, white ink calligraphy, I think could be really pretty. I don't know.
We'll see. We'll report back if any of us get requests for Mocha Mousse envelopes this year.
I really feel like as business owners, I think this is where it's not like the couples are going to be asking for it, but how can we take the conversation that people are having and add to it or give our spin on it to make ourselves look like thought leaders, be thought leaders in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You shared so many great 2025 wedding trends that we can get excited about and look ahead to. And there were so many great ways and ideas that calligraphers specifically can apply those trends to our industry for weddings and events in the year ahead. So one of my questions for you is, as calligraphers, we tend to be booked later within the wedding planning process. And we also aren't necessarily getting the full scope of what's going on at the wedding. Whereas like usually the planner obviously will have a good idea, even photographers, just because of timelines and things like that, florists. So as calligraphers who are sometimes like at, the end of the line, if you will, in the vendor booking process, do you have any tips for how we can kind of pull some of this, the information out of our clients for what they have planned? Like, for example, do they have private vows planned, or, what are they planning to incorporate in their day? And then how could we also maybe start to even plant the seed with our couples of like, have you noticed this going around? Or what do you think about incorporating something like this into your wedding day, and kind of start to approach that conversation with them?
I think that's a great question. I definitely think that's probably accurate for what you all are experiencing, but I don't think you should use it as a stumbling block. I think if you are able to, well, first of all, like, I think in your social media, just show all the different examples of what you're doing and talking about it, and like telling the story of like, so and so we're doing private vows, and so we did this, or like however it is. Like, I think starting, planting that seed and talking about it more is really important, just to kind of set the tone and inspire them. And then they'll, before they have a call with you, they're probably going to be going on your Instagram or on your website and like seeing this kind of inspiration anyway. So it's already going to be kind of like a way to educate them in advance. But then I think on the call, whether they have a planner or it's just them, I think talking through, asking questions like, can I see your mood board, or can I see your design plan? What details or moments are you guys really looking forward to? Or like, what's really important to you guys about the wedding? To really get an idea of like, this is what, Johnny and Susie are really excited about. How can we enhance those special moments for them with calligraphy? And I don't think you necessarily have to give them an example right away. I think if you take all the information that they have, hopefully get like a mood board or a design plan to see all the kind of like the different vignettes of the day, or the different like micro events that are happening. And then when you put together your proposal, here's what you asked for. This is, it's this. But then I wanted to suggest some other things that I think could be really fun or make it really special. So here are the vow books, or whatever it is. Because I think, again, it goes back to that personalization. I think having something to show that you are listening, and then here is what I heard, and here's what I suggest based on our conversation, I think could also enhance your wedding day. I think could be really helpful for you and them.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like these are such great tips. And I loved that you started with educating your audience and kind of planting the seed, because I think as calligraphers, we know exactly what we do. And kind of to your point in the very beginning, where you're like, I don't follow a ton of planners. It's like we are following other people in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's this kind of assumption that our clients know what we offer and what we're capable of doing. But I remember a few years ago being on a consult call and somebody being like, oh, I didn't realize you did that. And I was like, oh, I'm not doing a good enough job of showcasing everything that is possible when you work with me and what I specialize in or what I'm able to offer, because people didn't realize that I can offer the full suite of day of details. And so I think it's just making sure that you are always putting yourself kind of in your client's shoes and remembering that like your client hasn't gotten married before, most likely. So it's your job to show like what you are capable of doing or what's possible, or even if it's just like inspiration ideas that you're posting on your stories or doing a reel or a carousel post of like, this is what I'm really loving in 2025. And I'm looking for couples who want to work with me on these types of things, and like putting it out there.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's the same with wedding planners. Not all wedding planners have the same skill set or the same offerings. Same thing with calligraphers. Like some people do this, some people do that. And so I think making sure that you're talking about those things that you are really excited about, or, different things that you offer, can also distinguish you from other people too. And also educate them of like, they do this, but we do this, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up, because I was thinking that too. Like, we all have very different businesses, and it's our job to make sure our clients know what we do. We can't just assume that they like read minds, or even like read our website in
Right.
detail, you know?
Yeah.
But also asking these questions like Desiree's talking about, this is kind of the key to helping you build like bigger proposals, book larger clients. So like, don't just take what they come to you at face value with. Like if they email you and say, I want a welcome sign, do that discovery, ask them what else they need. That's where you can start talking about the other things that you do that you can offer for them and how you can build bigger packages with incorporating calligraphy for that client.
Yeah, I agree. And even if you're saying, usually like when we have a discovery call or a consult, we'll go through and we'll listen to what they want, what they hear, whatever. And even at the end, these are all the other things that we offer too. I think these would be great for like even just showing them like here are all the different varieties of that or ways that we can provide calligraphy services. It's just that saying it multiple times and them seeing it, I think is also it's important for educating them too, because it takes some repetition for them to actually hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one thing I just wanted to note was that, one of my favorite parts of the design process is collaborating with our vendors. And so I have ideas, I kind of, know where I think we're going to go in the overall direction, but I really love it. And honestly, I really almost expect it from the good vendors, where if I have an idea, I want you to propose other ideas or other ways of doing something, because I'm not a calligraphy expert. I don't know everything that there is about the inks or the different mediums you can go on or whatever. And so I think having I want to encourage our listeners to not be afraid to speak up and make suggestions and say, hey, I hear this, but there's a new technique I want to try, or there's something new and different that I want to do. Like, what do you think about that? I think having that collaborative process and you also showing your value, I think will make the planner or client feel like you're listening, but you're also bringing something new to the experience.
That's probably one of my main takeaways actually from your interview is I've heard you say the word thought leader several times. And I think that's something that like we as calligraphers and our listeners and all business owners in general, we kind of need that reminder sometimes that like we are the expert at what we do. I think a lot of us feel imposter syndrome, but we have to remember that like we know more about calligraphy and our specialty and the work that we do about our clients and even more than the planners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as the vendors, we need to step into that and be really confident that we're bringing that expertise and speak up, like you said.
Yeah, no, I think it's exactly what you said, because I'm not the expert. And I think when a planner or a client really tries to put those restrictions on a vendor, I think it's really hard. And I think you're not excited to do that work. You're like, okay, here, but if it's something that you really want to do, I think it just makes the collaboration. I feel like that's where the magic happens, really, is when you are able to contribute and you're excited about something.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Desiree, I feel like you just shared a wealth of knowledge with us, from everything from wedding trends to just like Xiaochen just said, kind of owning your expertise within your industry, which I feel like is going to be so much value to people. So can you please just share with our listeners where they can find you if they want to follow you for some wedding trends?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I feel like we had such a great conversation, and I'm really excited for your listeners to hear their thoughts on it. I mostly hang out on Instagram. So Verve Event Co, that's VERVE Event Co on Instagram. My podcast is the Ask the Planner podcast on Instagram, and obviously there's online, but can't wait to connect with you all.
We'll be sure to drop all of that into the show notes. And also, if you're a calligrapher who wants to get started working with wedding clients, I also have a free masterclass that will show you how to do that. And so I'll link that in the show notes as well.
Thank you, Desiree.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on this episode. It was so much fun chatting with you both.
Thanks for listening to our show. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us wherever you're listening and leave us a quick rating.
And don't forget, you can find us on Instagram at Calligraphy Biz Corner and send us a DM to let us know how you're liking the show. Until next time, keep the ink flowing and the dreams growing.